what really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Tuesday, October 31st, 2017, last day of the month. It's Halloween. Happy Halloween. And we have got a lot of stuff to talk about today. And speaking of Halloween, apparently Hillary has decided that her Halloween costume this year, she's going to go as the President of the United States of America. And she's going to show up on the front porch and beg for the candy and everything. And after you give her the candy, she won't go away, which I think is sort of very appropriate for Hillary. And, of course, tonight is Halloween, where all those cute little costumed extortionists will be running around the neighborhood demanding tribute of candy at the risk of your house or car being toilet papered here. But this year the joke is on them, because Claire and I got these little gummy treats that are loaded with vitamin C, and they're actually healthy. So the joke's on them. They're not getting the junk food candy from us here. I don't know how much trick-or-treating we're going to get tonight, though. Unfortunately, we got thunderstorms coming on in. But, you know, that's just the way these things work. We're following this breaking story apparently out of New York, where this vehicle drove down a bike path and struck pedestrians and cyclists. There's a lot of mixed stories going on. At one point they said there was gunshots, then they said, well, maybe not, we're not sure. So it's very confusing. The corporate media is totally focused on that, which raises the question, what are we being distracted from? Because it always seems like every time we're getting close to one of the really big, ugly scandals, oh, there's a mass shooting, there's this, there's that, the Hindenburg has crashed. Let's pay attention to that. Meanwhile, also for those of you on the U.S. East Coast, apparently, they're getting a lot of heavy rains and a lot of power outage and all that stuff there. They're cleaning up from that mess here. So let's get on to the news here. The corporate media, when they're not reporting on this bike lane incident in New York City, they're going on and on still about Mueller's arrests and indictments. Oh, see, there's indictments in the Russia investigation. Well, there's a couple of problems there. First of all, these arrests have got nothing to do with Russia. This is all stuff that happened long before Manafort and Gates were even part of the Trump campaign. Technically, they fall outside Mueller's original mandate. And if anything, it is underscoring the fact that Mueller's investigation has been a complete failure, because what he was supposed to do was find evidence of Trump colluding with Russia, not Manafort colluding with Ukraine. And that's all he's found. Now, apparently, one of the issues that led to the indictment and subsequent pleading of guilty of Papadopoulos, basically he's admitted he misled FBI agents over the timing of his contacts with a London professor who had connections with Russia. Now, the London professor was not named in the court documents, but apparently has been identified as Professor Joseph Mifsud, honorary director of the London Academy of Diplomacy, which is affiliated with the University of Stirling in Scotland. So if he's in an Academy of Diplomacy, it makes sense he would have contacts in countries all over the world. And he's out there saying his conscience is clear. There was this one meeting with an individual with connections to the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but it appears to have been diplomatic at best. It's another nothing burger. If anything, Mueller's indictment confirms that there was a link from Manafort to Podesta. So once again, we're back at the Podesta Group, and of course, as you know, Tony Podesta has now stepped down from that company. He's trying to distance himself from what's going on. And apparently the only real documented connection they can find between Manafort and Russia goes through Podesta and the Podesta Group, which was lobbying for uranium-1. So at bottom, Mueller's investigation was supposed to be about Trump and Russia, and he's found nothing. And he's coming up with this Gates and Manafort thing to make it look like it was worth all the money. And it's outside his original mandate. And again, if you look at the actual statute controlling special counsels, they have to be named only after a preliminary investigation has indicated there is reason to proceed. That didn't happen. Rosenstein simply declared it by imperial edict. And so under the letter of the law, Mueller's entire investigation is completely illegal. And then you have on top of that all of Mueller's clear conflicts of interest, which should have eliminated him from ever being any part of this investigation. Now, apparently, Tony Podesta is getting very nervous about how all the links in all of this keep coming back to him and his brother John, who was Hillary's campaign manager, and the Podesta group. Tony Podesta is now threatening Tucker Carlson with a lawsuit. Don't you talk about it saying, I'll sue you. I don't care if I win or lose. I'll bankrupt you in the court here. And Tucker Carlson basically laughed at him for that. But, I mean, that's how scared these people really are. Because it's coming on out that the Podesta group was in the heart of lobbying for that Uranium One deal. And that's where we need to keep our focus. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network. Now, as far as Mueller's indictments, there's a goof in there that undermines the credibility of what they have been doing, because the indictment against Paul Manafort refers to Ukrainian politician Yulia Tymoshenko as a former president of Ukraine. She's never been president of Ukraine. She ran for the office twice, in 2010 and 2014, but she lost both times. So already in this indictment, it's showing slapdash, careless, reckless work, not checking their facts at all. Meanwhile, there's another story that came out of Brass Check, basically saying that Clinton was trying to involve the Russians to attack Donald Trump. And apparently the DNC's latest scam was they did work with Russian government officials to try and sway the 2016 election to Hillary Clinton. And at this point, given the Uranium One deal, I think Trump would have been perfectly happy with the President Hillary Clinton because she's blackmailable over that Uranium One deal. And I think she's already been blackmailed because when all of this stuff was going on down, the FBI arrested 10 Russian spies here in the United States of America. And instead of being sent to prison along with Jonathan Pollard, Hillary Clinton worked very hard to get these 10 Russians immediately sent back to Russia, much as the U.S. government worked to send those arrested Mossad agents from 9/11 back to Israel as quickly as possible. Get them out of here. Don't let anybody talk to them. All right, let's take a phone call here. Kevin in West Virginia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mr. Mike, how are you today? How's Bizarro World?
It's getting more bizarre every day.
I'm just throwing this out there. It's a thought that I have. When Trump goes to Asia or goes to see China, I'm a little afraid they might try to blow Air Force One out of the air and say it's North Korea, and there's our war.
It's a real possibility, and I actually got a couple of emails yesterday saying that was a real possibility because it would get them the war with North Korea, and it would certainly get rid of Trump, and serve the deep state as well. So obviously there is reason to be concerned.
I mean, do you think, is our chances slightly high, not that well? I mean, I know it's a concern, but how much of a probability, how bold do you think they would be on that?
I think it's a remote possibility, but we cannot rule it out. And all we can do is just sort of be prepared if something happens to Air Force One and Donald Trump to just assume that it's another deep state false flag. They want to get rid of him. They're desperate to get rid of him. Everybody's screaming impeachment, impeachment, even though Mueller came up with absolutely nothing to link Trump with Russia. In fact, at this point, after all these investigations, the only person who wasn't colluding with the Russians was Donald Trump. Everybody else was Hillary Clinton, John Podesta, Tony Podesta, all these people.
Absolutely, and I totally agree. I mean, and I've said this to you before. How in the world can Mueller investigate himself and investigate this when he's smack dab in the middle of all of this?
Well, he shouldn't be able to, but Attorney General Jeff Sessions didn't say anything. They're all compromised. I mean, the problem that Donald Trump is dealing with is the swamp is all-encompassing inside that beltway. There is nobody out there there's nobody within the beltway he can turn to who's not already part of this narcocracy. He needs to start canning people. He needs to start canning people inside his administration and replacing them with outsiders who are qualified to do the work but are not tangled up with these political connections. And again, I want to put in a plug. We need Larry Klayman up there in Washington, D.C. as a special counsel. He'll get to the truth.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. I mean, can we, the people, call for a recall on Jeff Sessions? Is that a possibility?
You can sign petitions for it and so forth and so on, but ultimately Trump has the authority to fire Jeff Sessions. And, of course, the media will scream, oh, he's trying to derail the investigation. He's trying to derail the investigation. It's a complex problem, unfortunately.
I mean, at this point, throw the optics out the window. Let's just get the job done.
Well, there's another way to look at it. Trump may just be sitting on back because everything that Sessions is doing, everything that Mueller is doing, is so obviously biased and partisan. The American people aren't being fooled by any of this stuff, and that whole narcocracy is in the process of self-destructing. Politics is perception, and right now the perception of the American people is that Sessions is just another Loretta Lynch, that everybody's out to protect Hillary Clinton, and through her protect that narcocracy, because that is the rotted, deep, dark cancer at the heart of our federal government. And when that gets
when it comes, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. When that gets revealed to the public and the American people are forced to confront the reality that the biggest drug dealer in the country is the country, this could be the downfall of the entire federal government.
Absolutely. I mean, and it needs to come down. And I commend Trump for saying, the national emergency with the opioid thing. If we really want to get rid of the problem, why don't we take the Monsanto glyphosate and spray the Afghan fields, the poppy fields with opium, and let's stop this. I've had too many friends die because of this, and I would like something to be done about it.
Well, remember when the U.S. went into Afghanistan and they started planting the poppy fields, and everybody said, why are you allowing these poppy fields to be grown? Because that heroin is flowing back into the United States and over into Russia. And the official U.S. government response was, well, if we don't allow these farmers to grow the opium poppies, they'll starve to death. They have nothing else they can do, which is nonsense. What were they doing under the... May I finish? Okay.
Yes.
What were these farmers doing under the Taliban when the Taliban had cracked down on all heroin production in the country? Obviously, they were growing something. Poppies are more profitable, but it's not their only means of livelihood. But again, you look at the long history of the CIA and drug running, Kunsa's heroin from Vietnam, all the cocaine coming up from Central America during Iran-Contra. They're neck deep in this stuff. And Afghanistan is a very powerful supply, strong supply. But the other part of the opioid epidemic is that the opioids being sold by the pharmacies are not always derived from the opium plant. They're synthetics based on a molecule called fentanyl. And this is created in a factory. So putting Roundup all over the opium poppies might dry up the street drug problem, but it's not going to rein in the issue of abuse of opiates by the big pharmaceutical corporations and pharmacies and doctors.
Really agree. I just thought the Roundup thing would be at least a start.
Well, again, the problem with Roundup is it is highly toxic. It's a potential human carcinogen. There are other weed killers. I mean, go in and hit those fields with Agent Orange so nobody can ever use them again. Or maybe we can genetically engineer some kind of a plant-eating pest that likes to eat opium poppies and just spread them all over Afghanistan. I mean, the U.S. used to use insects to sabotage crops in South America to keep those nations permanently on the debt hook to American banks. So it's not beyond the realm of possibility. The fact that the opium traffic from Afghanistan is not being interfered with or stopped indicates the government wants it to continue.
Totally agree. Well, you have a great and wonderful day, Mr. Mike. That's all I have for you.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to let you go and switch over to Steve in Florida. Aloha, Steve. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I talked to Ron McDonald about this yesterday and also John Stadmiller, that how do you force people to actually fulfill the duties of their position, their job? Here I'm talking about people like Loretta Lynch and Jeff Sessions to do their job and actually, prosecute when they need to prosecute. And he mentioned writ of mandamus is the way you go about it, forcing people to comply to their duty obligations. Or in the case of like this Russian collusion, you must show forth knowledge or documents or evidence that there is something to go after on the Russian collusion situation, or you have nothing and it goes away, basically null and void.
Well, that was
so
the whole
I think
point.
That's
yeah.
I just don't know how you force. I mean, there has to be somebody who actually files the writ of mandamus on these individuals who refuse to do their job. But so far, I have seen no one to step up to the plate to file that.
Well, the problem is who has standing to file against the Attorney General. Generally, courts will allow you to file a writ of mandamus in cases that you are personally directly involved with. Unfortunately, the judge could simply say, you as an ordinary American citizen, you don't have standing to sue the Attorney General of the United States of America or Robert Mueller. Basically, the job of getting the government to do the job they're supposed to do falls on the President of the United States of America. He's supposed to be the one who's cracking that whip. And right now he's being constrained because he's probably aware that no matter what he does, the media is going to turn it around and make it look like it's evidence of his guilt about something. Again, there's another alternative theory, which is Trump is just going to hang back and allow these institutions to continue to destroy their own credibility in the eyes of the American people.
Right. Now, the newest FBI director, we have not heard from him much at all. Have you heard anything from him?
Nothing at all. He just seems to want to just stay in the shadows and not cause any trouble.
That's what I thought. Yeah, he's just lying low, and I haven't heard anything about doing his job and prosecution of the 37,000 emails. It all seems to just go away.
Well, that's what they're trying to do, is make it all go away, but it's not going to go away because we here in the independent media, we're not going to let it go away. We know where the real crime and collusion took place, okay, and we are sick and tired of the corporate media trying to decide for us what we think is an important news story or not. We're all big boys and big girls here. We can decide what's an important news story, and the important news stories are selling of 20% of our nation's uranium, which we could not afford to be without, by the way, to Russia, and along the way, the Clinton Foundation raked in millions and millions of dollars.
Keep it up, Mike. You're doing a great job.
All right,
Appreciate it.
Thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike.
Hi.
Hey, Mike, you mentioned Yulia Tymoshenko, which was the co-leader of, remember, the Orange Revolution?
Yes.
Remember, she ran against Yanukovych and lost. But remember, she said that 8 million Russians must be killed, and we're going to use a nuclear weapon against them. This woman is part of that group of those Atlanticists, globalists linked to the Clintons, the Bushes. You know, she's a real bad actor. She was actually put in jail by Yanukovych, I believe. She was on either jail or house arrest, but she's a real bad actor. You know.
Yeah, I understand that. I understand that. The point, though, is that Mueller's indictment against Manafort described her as a former president of Ukraine, and it's flat out wrong. And it basically shows that Mueller's investigation is sloppy. They're not checking their facts. It's all slapdash work. And I think that fits with the idea that they just threw these indictments together as quickly as they could in an effort to distract everybody away from the uranium gate and dossier gate and all the rest of it. And it's not working. Because it's already crumbling. There's nothing there. If anything, these indictments underscore the fact that Mueller's investigation has found nothing about Trump and Russia directly. They're trying to do it through innuendo and, this person knew this person, and this person over here may have known this person and this person over there. Mueller's investigation has failed completely. Okay, it's over and done with. Let's go back to Uranium Gate and Dossier Gate, because that's where we need to keep the focus.
Do the Podesta brothers have life insurance? Because those guys are the link. Hey, Mike, no, don't laugh. They are in Hillary Clinton's emails numerous times, John Podesta.
Yes.
The Podesta brothers are that link where it spreads out. So, I mean, if you can get one of the Podesta brothers to flip, but, I don't know, man. Like, Mueller, that's all part of that tribe.
Okay.
They're all going to protect themselves.
Okay, Dustin, stay on the line. I'm going to come back to you after these words from our sponsors. Welcome back to our show, and before we get back to the phones here, for those of you who want to support Republic Broadcasting, you want to keep us on the air, on the satellites, on the web, and we do need your help. There's no question about that, because all the big money is going for the professional liars here. So get out your pencil and paper here. I'm going to give you an address and a phone number if you want to send in, mail in some kind of a donation. The address is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. If you want to telephone in and make a donation using credit card or some other means, the number is 800-724-2719. And I think it's extension 3 that you want to be dialing up on that one. All right, Dustin, getting on back to what you were talking about. Right now, Hillary's surrounded by a lot of live liabilities. But anybody who works for Hillary Clinton, and that includes the Podestas, they know the long history of dead bodies stretched out behind the Clintons' rise to power. And so they all probably have what is called a dead man switch. And that is a file of information that would absolutely bury somebody, and it's copied off in multiple locations with trusted individuals where if anything happens to somebody, the information gets dumped onto the media, onto the internet, onto the independent media, everywhere. Makes a big stink. And that's what keeps certain people alive when there are so many who want them to be dead. Vincent Foster's mistake was his dead man switch was inside his White House office safe where it could be gotten to following his murder. So I'm sure that the Podestas are very nervous about the possibility of meeting an untimely end, but I'm sure they've taken precautions to prevent that from happening. But at this point, I'm feeling a sense of panic and desperation inside the narcocracy, and I would not be at all surprised to start seeing some more wet work.
Hey, Mike, the previous caller that said that, it could be a possibility of Trump getting assassinated by getting shot down in Air Force One. But think about this. Remember when Erdogan went on vacation in Turkey, and then there was like that coup that occurred that was backed by the U.S.? So we'll never know. You never know with these type of things, like what they're planning or, it's remote, but hey.
It's a very dynamic time. There's no question about it. It's another possibility. I think it's remote, but certainly cannot dismiss it out of hand. Right now, you've got the war hawks want to move forward with all these wars, and we've got some alarming information about that later in the show. And you have all these people inside the federal government, inside the Beltway, who want Donald Trump gone any way possible. And so, nothing can be ruled out as ridiculous or too extreme at this point.
And Mike, real quick, I got one more story. I don't know if you caught it, but Putin was doing a question session, and he said somebody in Russia is collecting DNA samples.
Yeah, RNA samples. At least that's the version I heard. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the show as well, because that is a very alarming development.
All right, thanks a lot, Mike. Have a good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot here. We're going to switch over to Mike in Maryland. Aloha, Mike. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I told you, the screener, it's about North Korea, and I wanted to get your take on how serious the recent tunnel collapse, where North Korea tests their nuclear weapons, what the repercussions of that could be. I got my own take on it, of what possibly could happen, but how serious do you think that is, and then how it bodes for the region?
Well, it's very serious. I mean, the interior of the mountain is fractured. It's heavily contaminated. Chinese experts were saying don't go back on in there, and I'm rather surprised that North Korea did send a crew into the tunnel. Whether they were trying to dig a new tunnel or shore up the existing tunnel, they shouldn't have been in there. And then, of course, to send in a rescue team that gets killed in a second collapse. It telegraphs that, at least for the foreseeable future, North Korea cannot carry out any more nuclear weapon tests.
Well, do you think, I got two scenarios. Do you think that this could lead, if the radiation poisoning is really serious, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands could die within a matter of weeks. And if that happens, could this lead to a coup of Kim Jong-un with the military leaders under him?
Well, it might. Okay.
CIA move.
Okay, Mike, we got to take another break for commercials. Don't hang up. I'll come back to you after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And before we go back to Mike in Maryland, and we're just checking in on this incident in the New York area, Manhattan, and they're already pushing. Corporate media is already pushing. This is probably a terrorism attack. There's a rumor that the perpetrator was shouting Aloha snack bar or whatever it was. So this is already starting to reek of yet another staged incident to justify further wars and, again, drag the corporate media away from Uranium Gate and Dossier Gate and Mueller's absolute failure to find anything that connects Russia to Trump. So that's what this is starting to feel like to me. Now, getting back to Mike here in North Korea, the big issue, first of all, is how much, if any, radiation has leaked out of that mountain. The whole reason to have nuclear tests underground is to trap the radiation. And open-air tests have been banned by international treaty going back to, I think, the mid-'70s or someplace in there. If you go to Google Earth and you look at Nevada, to the northwest of Las Vegas, you'll see the whole proving ground, and there's just this area of all these giant craters, and every one of them represents an underground nuclear test, and all the radiation from that bomb is still trapped deep underground, which is why nobody's ever going to go in there and build any new hotels on the area, but it's still trapped underground. The concern expressed by the Chinese geologists was that the mountain being used as a testing ground by North Korea was so badly fractured by the earlier tests that a new test of a large weapon could literally trigger a massive landslide and rip open that buried radioactivity. So as of right now, the collapse of these two tunnels probably did not result in the release of a tremendous amount of radiation. In fact, if anything, it's probably sealed it in even more than was the case before. I think the concern here, the fact that they were in there working on the tunnels, tells us North Korea does not have an alternative testing place set up. And it's going to take them a while to do that. So I don't think we're going to see any more nuclear weapon tests by North Korea in the immediate future. As far as a coup against Kim Jong-un, right now he's enjoying a tremendous popular success for having the courage to stand up to the United States of America. And right now a lot of people in that part of the world, including many foreign governments, are actually cheering Kim Jong-un on for being willing to stand up to the U.S. war machine. So I don't think a coup d'etat is very, very likely. I think the ramifications of the tunnel collapse is there will be no more nuclear tests in the immediate future, which leaves the United States kind of in a lurch. How are they going to justify a strike on North Korea if there are no nuclear tests anymore? And if the only missiles being launched are putting, peaceful satellites into orbit? So I think that's where we're going with all of this.
Well, there are some experts say that this could trigger a regional-wide radiation catastrophe. So I guess we'll have to wait and see. But
well,
my second scenario is...
I'm sure there's a lot of monitoring all around there. All the neighboring nations have got their radiation meters. Every nation has a radiation monitoring network. That's how they discovered Chernobyl had blown up. Because Russia didn't call up and say, hey, we just blew up our reactor. It's just all the radiation monitors all across Europe started picking it up. So far, I have not heard of any radiation monitors anywhere in that part of the world picking up any significant increases.
Okay, well, there could be for now. But my second scenario is that let's say if it really gets bad, what if Kim Jong-un says that the Yankee imperialist struck the nuclear test site with the cruise missile, thus releasing the radioactivity in the area to cause mayhem and bloodshed, and he may use it as a pretext to attack our carriers in the North China Sea, or maybe attack South Korea. I mean, to me, that's a possibility as well.
Well, at this point, we need to be very, very careful about what we think we know about Kim Jong-un, because most of that is being fed to us by the same people who told us Saddam had nuclear weapons. Kim Jong-un, as far as I can tell, he wants to basically build a deterrent so that the United States will leave North Korea alone, because everybody in North Korea remembers how badly they all suffered at the hands of the United States during the Korean War. And yes, it's true, North Korea initiated that war, but at this point they're not initiating anything. All of the aggression, all of the tough talk is coming from the side of the United States of America. And when you, again, go back and look over the last 16 years of warmongering across the globe, it's always the United States that is initiating invasions, conquests, drone strikes, coup d'etats, what have you. Always there's a rationale and a justification. Oh, we've got to engage them over there so we don't have to fight them over here. But again, for all this talk about nuclear weapons with Iran and Iraq and North Korea, there's only one nation in history that's ever actually used a nuclear weapon of mass destruction against the civilians of another country, and that is the United States of America.
Well, that's true, but also, too, having North Korean missiles sail over northern Japan doesn't help matters either.
Well, again, the height at which the missile was sailing over Japan, I mean, in this day and age of a crowded sky, there's somebody's hardware flying over your head several times a day. It's not really a big deal anymore. And when the United States tests missiles, some of that will go over other people's countries. And there's agreements to try and say, let's not have an accident come down on somebody's real estate. But again, North Korea has as much right as any other country to be testing their weapons to make sure they're actually going to work when needed.
Yeah, but his country is starving to death, so that's a misplaced appropriation of funds.
We've got people starving in this country. We've got
Oh, yeah.
Okay, because the money's being diverted to the military. And so Kim Jong...
Yeah, but we're not nowhere near as bad off as North Korea.
Well, we don't really know. I mean, if you were Kim Jong-un and you'd seen the United States, which has invaded Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, Yemen, Somalia, now they're down in Niger and all across Africa, and all of a sudden they start talking tough about coming into your country, what is going to be your priority? It's going to be to defend your country. It's going to be to defend your country. You wouldn't defend your country? You wouldn't, Mike, listen to me. Answer a question. You wouldn't defend the people of your nation against an aggressor?
Of course I would. But the thing about it is,
that's the point I'm making.
A conventional war against North Korea would kill hundreds of thousands of American troops if we invaded them.
True.
Look at the size of the army.
Yeah, but the other side of it is the U.S. is talking about
nuclear weapons.
Mike, they're talking about decapitation strikes here. And it doesn't matter whether it's conventional or decapitation. The United States does not have a legitimate reason to be invading or attacking North Korea, other than that Kim Jong-un won't do as he's told.
I agree.
Okay. All right.
Well, listen. 100%.
All right, Mike, got to let you go. Got callers waiting on the line. We're going to switch over to Francis in Vancouver. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I'm sorry if I'm regurgitating yesterday's news because it's just dropped right off the whole landscape. But this thing with Las Vegas shooting has been erased pretty much now from everybody's memory. And but there is one incident that has happened, that there's a married couple that survived the attack.
Yes.
And now they've died in a flaming car wreck. And just they ran into a light pole or some pillar outside their estate, and they burned to death inside their car.
Yeah, a lot of people are looking at that because apparently there was the sound of an explosion that carried for miles. Wow. And this happened like half a mile from their home. This is not like somebody that you would see driving crazily when they're getting close to home. And this couple didn't have the reputation. Right now, there is a total of 8 confirmed witnesses to the Las Vegas shooting, all of whom were saying there were multiple shooters that have now died under very strange circumstances.
Wow. But, nobody wants to talk about it. The mainstream media didn't find out that he was a crazed white supremacist Nazi, and so we don't want to hear about it anymore, and we're not going to hear about it anymore. And, the police aren't coming forth and saying what this shooter was all about. We don't know. Though they did say that they found a recharger for a very specific battery that's used by the CIA, communications devices.
Well, then they turned around and said, no, it wasn't, and they'd found the cell phone that it went to. But the idea that there were multiple charges for multiple cell phones in that room tells us there was definitely more than one person. In any event, it was a staged incident. They handled it badly. The story is crumbling apart. I'm looking at this situation here in New York. I think that one's going to fall apart. They're just shooting from the hip on all of this stuff. And every time they do another one of these, it just slams their credibility that much more.
Well, there's a lot of beautiful things happening, and it's really good to see that at long last. I've never thought we'd see Hollywood just crumble into ruins like this. And Jennifer Lawrence has taken a 2-year sabbatical to go and practice pottery. And, she was really close to this Harvey guy.
Weinstein.
And why? Weinstein. Why is she suddenly stopped at 27 years of age, the height of her career? Why has she fled the scene? Is she culpable in something?
Could very well be. Everybody's the rats. The rats are leaving the sinking ships, and what we're seeing across our entire culture is a great disillusionment in all of our all areas of our life. The Tinseltown sparkle is now gone. We see our politicians as corrupt, our media as lying to us constantly. The American people are all of a sudden realizing that virtually everything they thought they knew about life in the United States of America has been a carefully crafted, well-maintained illusion. But the illusions are now all crumbling. We're looking at that man behind the curtain over off to the side of the throne of Oz.
I see even Robert De Niro now has changed his tune dramatically. And it happens simultaneously with people bringing up the fact that the French police wanted to talk to him about an underage call girl network where his name popped up on some of these books.
Yep.
And suddenly now, and they were talking about, extradition and stuff, and now all of a sudden, well, maybe, Trump's not so bad, and we should give him a chance. I just sort of see everything. This didn't just happen in Hollywood.
No.
This is Trump and the people around him are engineering this, and it's a beautiful piece of intrigue, and I'm loving it.
I disagree.
Level Hollywood.
I disagree with the idea that Trump engineered it. I wouldn't rule it out entirely, but Trump's got more important things to be doing. The fact of the matter is, and I saw this when I worked in Hollywood, this stuff has been going on all the time. This has been a disaster waiting to happen. And it was going to happen sooner or later, and every once in a while it does. We've got Harvey Weinstein today. We had David Begelman before, the Hollywood Madam, and they do show up, and it does harm Hollywood, and it wakes people up to realize that those wonderful people you see on those movie and TV screens are not that way in real life. Their fame and their fortune gets to their head in many cases. And as I said before, my experience in Hollywood is people come in two varieties. The absolute saints that are just wonderful human beings, and then the absolute slimeball snakes. And there's very little in between.
Yep.
Okay?
Well, enjoy your show. Keep it up.
All right, thanks. Now, getting on back here. Getting on back to Uranium Gate, getting on back here to Dossier Gate. There's an interesting article out of Investment Watch blog, and it's talking about how Victoria Tonsing, who's the lawyer representing the still unidentified FBI informant, who's now been cleared to testify before Congress, and she's saying there's an on-the-record quid pro quo surrounding the Uranium One scandal, with Bill Clinton receiving that $500,000 speaking fee from a Russian-backed bank, and the Clinton Foundation receiving millions of dollars from people involved in the Uranium One deal. It's out there. And the article is out there basically saying that the American people are finding out how the FBI and the Department of Justice have been completely discredited trying to protect Hillary Clinton. Now, for those of us who have been following this situation in the government for a lot of time, there's nothing new here. The FBI were protecting the Clintons all the way back to Vince Foster. But again, there is far more evidence of Hillary's collusion with Russia than Trump's. And we're seeing the machinery of government still obsessing about Donald Trump. We're seeing the corporate media still out there trying to sell this Russia's to blame for everything idea. And again, maybe Trump's strategy is to just sit back and let the Department of Justice discredit itself, let the FBI discredit itself, let the corporate media discredit itself, because they're doing a wonderful job at it, and he doesn't really need to help. So, basically, Jason Chaffetz is out there saying that the media's handling of the dirty dossier is absolutely shameful, and they're right. The corporate media has given scant seconds of coverage to the fact that it was the DNC and the Hillary campaign, among others, who basically paid this Fusion GPS to come up with this dossier. which has been totally discredited. And yet it was given to the FBI and may have been the piece of evidence that led to the FISA warrants to wiretap Donald Trump and his associates. And then, of course, it was leaked into the media to try and smear Donald Trump. This is dirty politics. It's very dirty, and the corporate media is fully on board. And the reason the corporate media is fully on board is because the CIA is feeling itself at risk of exposure for all the decades of drug running into this country. And the CIA does influence the media heavily, and the word has gone on out. Protect us. Protect the narcocracy. Protect the narco dollars. We'll be right back after these commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And the corporate media is having a field day with this incident in New York City. And the stories are all over the place here. The Daily Telegraph is saying 2 of the people who died were shot dead as the driver was opening fire from within this truck. But the Boston Globe is saying that after police shot the suspect and arrested him, the only gun they found was an imitation firearm, by which I'm assuming it's something like an airsoft gun. So the stories are really all over the place, but they're out there saying, oh, yes, it's terror, and it was near the World Trade Center. Actually, the original reports were that it was just south of Central Park, which is actually quite a long distance away from the World Trade Center, but they're pushing this whole terror thing. So already this is reeking of staged incident, staged incident, staged incident. Now, getting on back to the real news that you need to be paying attention to, apparently Mayor de Blasio is out there trying to evade a pay-for-play allegation regarding a donor-turned-felon, Jonah Reichnicht, who apparently is saying, under sworn testimony, that Mayor de Blasio called and begged him for a $100,000 donation. And de Blasio's out there saying, well, I don't really have any recollection. I mean, I'm asking so many people for money. I can't remember every time I ask somebody for cash. So he's out there dodging his own pay-for-play here. All right, let's turn over to the war zones because there's a lot of stuff going on over there. Sergei Lavrov is out there saying that right now the United States is applying pressure to Serbia that is very reminiscent of the pressures being applied to Ukraine prior to the coup d'etat in Kiev. And we're actually seeing from within the Serbian media itself, the president of Serbia, Aleksandar Vučić, said that pressure on Serbia and him is great to basically try and drag them into the European Union. And it's borderline threats that if he doesn't do as he's told, bad things will happen. So already we're seeing more of this forced conversion of foreign governments all across the globe. Now, this is the part I referred to earlier in the show. This is really very scary. Now, as you know, the original 2001 authorization for the use of military force was never intended to last this long. It had certain restrictions built into it. A lot of people have been saying it needs to be struck down and the authority to make war restored to Congress as required by the Constitution of the United States of America. Now, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson and Defense Secretary James Mattis have a different idea. They want a new permanent, open-ended authorization for the use of military force, unlimited in time, unlimited in geographic reach. Their excuse being that if we have a limited time for the use of military force, the enemy will be emboldened to simply sit back and wait and not do anything and run out the clock. So what Tillerson and Mattis are talking about is giving the war authority directly to the Pentagon itself, and that was never intended by the Constitution. We'll be back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here and getting on back to this incident in Manhattan, which the corporate media is already out there saying, oh, it's terror, terror, terror. He was shouting aloha snack bar. That actually came from one witness, has not been corroborated. They've already backed off the story that this guy was shooting people because the only guns found on him are now being reported as a BB gun and a paintball gun. And that all the deaths and injuries resulted from this guy driving his truck the wrong way down this bike lane and apparently collided with some of their vehicles. And they're trying to say, oh, terror, 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 terror. Well, I don't know. It doesn't seem very well thought out. BB gun and a paintball gun. I want to know if this guy was on prescription antidepressants. That's what I want to know. And they're just trying to exploit the situation for its propaganda value. Getting on back to the war zones here, a Russian submarine has fired a barrage of Caliber cruise missiles from the Mediterranean to targets in Syria's Deir ez-Zor governorate, destroying Islamic State command posts, fortifications, and arms depot. The submarine, the Veliki Novgorod, of the Varnashvyanka class, hit the positions of the Islamic State. And apparently this was the same submarine that had been used before for the same thing. Those calibers appear to be able to hit what they're aimed at, and that is very, very significant. All right, let's take another phone call here. Francis in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, aloha to you.
Aloha Snack Bar.
Touche. You know, when I heard about they reported about that couple that lost their life in a fireball crash or whatever, the vehicle and so forth, on the local news recently, and the first thing that came to mind was interesting, very interesting. So my question is, who in the world is doing the tracking of the people that actually survived that fiasco, that scenario, at that occurrence?
I imagine that would be the FBI using all those wonderful little holes in our phones and everything provided by the NSA. Our lives are totally transparent to the government. And, you know, they're probably listening for people who are out there saying, I know there were multiple shooters, and I know this, and I know that. And if people start paying attention to them, then something terrible happens. I go back to that first dead body, that young lady, 28 years old. She was trying to organize a group of survivors of the shooting who are all out there saying there was more than one gunman. And all of a sudden, she's found dead in her bed, claimed of natural causes at 28 years old. And this car crash, the way it's described, it reminds me a lot of Michael Hastings. And we know that these new modern cars with automatic parking and everything goes through the computer. And the computer can be hijacked remotely. That's been demonstrated time and time again. Like everything else in our lives, our cars have been engineered to be used as weapons against us.
Well, true. However, mind you, Michael, that you left out one tiny element, and there's one thing I have to correct you on.
What's that?
The one thing you left out is the little Mikey chips that everybody carries around nowadays, either in their credit card or whatever. That's apparently you cannot opt out of, for that matter, as I've come to learn recently. That also tracks you, regardless of whether it's a license or a passport or who knows, or your credit card, for that matter. As for the correction, for one thing, as far as alphabet soup agencies are concerned, pick one of your choice. They are not part of the U.S. government that the U.S. individual is familiar with. Supposedly the government is supposed to be for, by, and whatever of the people. The alphabet soup agencies do not answer to the everyday person. So
no, they don't. I mean, CIA and FBI answer to the executive branch. Then you have other intelligence agencies that are answerable directly to the Pentagon. But they see themselves as a power under themselves, especially CIA. CIA has been rogue almost since the moment it was created.
I can give you that. And it's interesting you mentioned about the Pentagon. So the question is, how much of a role has the Pentagon played in these false flag scenarios in conjunction with Hollywood?
Well, I don't know about Hollywood, and I don't know about Las Vegas, but obviously the Pentagon had to be involved in the military stand-downs that left New York open for 9/11.
Well, that's pretty clearly obvious. If anybody happens to be a human being with two brain cells to rub together, that's not been mentally conditioned to think otherwise and be like chilled jello or whatever the case might be, that was pretty obvious. But I right now I'm pretty speechless about what's going on as far as the distractions go, as far as the proceedings go, that everybody's saying, well, that shouldn't be happening, that shouldn't be happening. Guess what? If the various politicians weren't pulling these maneuvers to start with, we wouldn't have to be going through all this garbage and all the false flag scenarios. So, anyway, thanks a bunch.
All right, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. Now, we're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network, getting on back to Syria, for that matter, Iraq, and Russia's stunning success against ISIS and al-Qaeda. The head of the lower house committee for defense in the Duma is predicting that ISIS will be destroyed in both Syria and Iraq before the end of the year. And they're making huge progress, and obviously that Caliber cruise missile strike has caused a huge amount of damage. Now, getting on over to Yemen, Saudi Arabia, trying to sort of remove itself from the center of attention for the humanitarian crisis, is now out there saying that Iran is blocking peace efforts in Yemen. That if it wasn't for Iran, this would have all settled down a long time ago. It's only because Iran is in there mucking about that we haven't brought this to the resolution we all want it to be. And basically, Iran is rejecting it, saying it's absolutely ridiculous that Iran has been wanting to, find a peaceful solution for this. But it all comes down to this Saudi Arabia leading this military coalition backing Yemen's former government in its fight against the Shia Houthis. Now, the issue that you all need to remember is Yemen's former government is the puppet regime installed in the last intervention in Yemen that the people of Yemen didn't want to live under, and they kicked them out. That's what this is all about. The U.S. has sent Saudi Arabia into Yemen to slap them around and say, look, once we give you a puppet ruler, you will learn to love and cherish and obey them. That's what this is really all about. Now, Vladimir Putin came on out during a policy talk at the Valdai Discussion Club, and he came on out and he said the biggest mistake that he ever made was trusting the West, specifically the U.S. government. And so the world is waking up to that realization. You cannot trust anything coming out of the Western sphere of influence. They make all kinds of promises, none of which are going to be kept. Now, we had a caller earlier in the show that was talking about this, where apparently, and this is out of Russia Today, somebody is harvesting Russian genetic material all over the country. And this is coming from Putin himself, wondering at what's going on here. And apparently there was an earlier incident where the U.S. Air Force was trying to acquire Russian tissue samples. What are they going to do? Plant Putin's DNA on the DNC email server? There may be another much darker purpose, because several years ago, Israel was developing ethnically sensitive biological weapons that would kill Arabs but not Jews. And apparently Dr. David Kelly had been involved with that as well, and may have been part of the reason why he was ultimately assassinated. But if Israel has perfected this idea of ethnically specific biological weapons, then we're looking at somebody starting a huge global pandemic that only takes out certain ethnic groups. And that may be the reason they're trying to take all these genetic samples of Russian people. And there's a lot of different subgroups in Russia all over the place. It's a huge country, huge country. Meanwhile, speaking of Dr. David Kelly, as you know, the official story, after all of his testimony was over about the dodgy dossier and the weapons, and he was out of trouble and everything was just fine, all of a sudden he goes for a walk in the mountains and he kills himself while wearing heart monitor suction cups still on his chest, which was kind of weird. But apparently, under the orders of his family, Dr. David Kelly's body has been exhumed. And nobody knows what's going on, but it may well be that Dr. David Kelly's family has decided they want their own autopsy to look for evidence of foul play. And there certainly is enough foul play to go around in this day and age. Now, here's another little wrinkle. And apparently, U.S. Special Forces have captured one of the militants who was supposedly behind the 2012 attack on the U.S. consulate in Benghazi. And it's bringing back that whole story about how Hillary basically abandoned these people to be killed. And, of course, this militant who was there may have a story of the attack on the consulate that's a little bit different than we all got angry over a YouTube video, which was Hillary's excuse. So there may be something brewing there, another reason for Hillary to lose sleep tonight. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And they're holding a press conference about what happened in lower Manhattan. And so far it's all, our thanks to the first responders and heroic this and heroic that. They've now backed off claiming that anybody was shot. And again, the only guns that were actually found were a BB gun and a paintball gun. And so the gun grabbers are going, oh, darn it. We'll ban BB guns. 15-day waiting period for paintballs. I really do want to get back to the news here because we got a lot of stuff to cover in a very short amount of time. Getting on back over to North Korea, we reported yesterday, North Korea is now having what are called blackout drills, where they simply tell everybody in the city, turn out all your lights so that pilots coming in overhead at nighttime can't see anything. That's actually a tactic out of World War II, and unfortunately in this age of night vision scopes and look-down radar, it's not that effective. But they're basically trying to prepare for what they see as an imminent U.S. invasion. And now they're running safety drills for the event that the United States is going to use nuclear weapons on North Korea, and it's a real concern. Because, again, the United States is the only nation with a history of using nuclear weapons on the civilians of another country. Now, we've already talked about this terrible accident they had at the North Korea nuclear test site where workers were excavating a tunnel and it collapsed, and it killed 100 people. They sent in another 100 people trying to rescue the colleagues, and they were killed when the tunnel suffered a second collapse. So given the fact that they were still working on that mountain, tells me that North Korea does not have a second site set up for underground nuclear testing, and that in turn tells me it will be a while before there is a new North Korean nuclear test. That in turn leaves the U.S. government in a bit of a mess because what are they going to use as an excuse to go into North Korea? There's not going to be a nuclear test. North Korea is not testing their ballistic missiles. They're going to do a satellite launch, but you can hardly justify a war on that. So that leaves a false flag of some kind. All right, we're going to take another phone call. Lenny in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, first off, I was calling about Saudi Arabia, but since you were on North Korea, the gentleman that in the first hour you were going round and around with, and you laid out all the facts, all the truth, and he just couldn't accept, the fact that it's not Kim Jong-un who's pushing for this, it's the United States of America. I appreciate you standing your ground for truth. It's the hardest thing to do in this day and age. Okay, but like I said, I did call about Saudi Arabia, and what you mentioned about them saying that Iran is the reason they can't come to peace in Yemen is a total lie. That's them using Hillary's reverse projection technique, and they're not even doing that well. Okay, everything she does, she blames it on Trump or the Republicans. Okay, and Saudi Arabia is trying to use the same technique, but it's a fail. And as we speak, they have hired Colombian mercenaries.
Okay, all right, that's ugly. Anyway, Lenny, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, all of a sudden, Americans are having to confront the reality that we also have wars going on in Africa. And that was being hidden from the American people until there was this ambush in which 4 Americans were killed. And then it came on out we have 1,000 troops in that country, that Niger is the hub for U.S. military activity in that part of Africa, and that in point of fact we have occupying troops in pretty much almost all of the countries of Africa right now. Big surprise to everybody, including apparently to members of the Congress and even Donald Trump himself. Well, now that it's out there, they're starting to act like, yes, it's a real war. The State Department has now issued a travel warning for Niger and surrounding areas, saying that if you travel there, you can be kidnapped by terrorist groups. Apparently, while it was still secret, it was okay to lose a few Americans over there. The Trump administration is now calling for drone strikes in the country of Niger. I think at this point we can say this is a world war. And we know who the bad guy is this time. Now, interestingly enough, back in 1984, there was a memo that came on out, that was issued, that detailed the constitutionality of a national security agency surveillance program. And the reality was it wasn't constitutional at all. This is one of the things that led Edward Snowden to do what he did. But apparently Pulitzer Prize-winning New York Times correspondent Charlie Savage brought a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit with the Office of Legal Counsel. And a federal judge has now supported the government's position that this memo needs to remain secret. Basically, what it comes down to is the NSA conducting surveillance not authorized by the Foreign Intelligence Service Act. In other words, they're just spying on everybody. They're not playing by the rules. A few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Let's talk about the economic news a little bit here. We were talking with a caller yesterday about how Dodd-Frank had been repealed, and it opened up the banks to engage in much riskier loans, which apparently they've gone ahead and done. And because risky loans charge higher interest, they're making huge amounts of money as long as the loans continue to be paid. But if those loans default, and there is that risk, then, of course, the banks are going to be in trouble. They're going to be calling for another bailout. And I think history shows, going all the way back to the 1920s, when the financial markets are allowed to operate without restrictions, without regulation, they tend to just let their money junkie greed overwhelm all of the considerations. And they can drive the system into instability and crashing. Now, down in Venezuela, as you know, they're in serious economic trouble. They've been the target of economic warfare by the United States going all the way back to Hugo Chavez. And they were in a serious crisis right now because they had two major payments that they're due to make right now, and they couldn't do them both. Russia has just pardoned $1 billion of Venezuela's debt for 2017. Just called up and said, don't send the payment. And Moscow is obviously supporting Caracas and the Maduro-led government. And Venezuela, gee, I wonder who they're going to be friends with from now on. The United States that put them in this economic mess, or Russia that's trying to help bail them out. Everything the U.S. is doing is driving countries into that Russian-Chinese sphere of influence. They really do not think these things all the way through, and that is their biggest failing. I got a reader's letter from somebody up in Canada, and apparently their daughter was just let go from her job with the news that Reebok Canada is shutting all of their stores by Christmas. So the retail Mageddon is continuing along, and any suggestion that we have a recovering economy is an illusion. It's as much an illusion as the 5% unemployment rate or the 3% inflation rate or any of these other official numbers coming from the governments that are absolutely, totally meaningless. Article out of goldcore.com saying that the stumbling British economy shows how important gold really is right now, because it is a preserver of wealth, and there are people working to discredit gold right now. In fact, it may be that all of these gold wafer fakes and gold bar fakes and coins are part of a plot to discredit gold in the eyes of ordinary people, to keep them in their savings account where the banks can grab the money, or keep them in the stock market where the brokers can grab the money. But everybody has a right to a portable store of wealth, to control their wealth, to keep it under their control. And they may discredit gold. They've already tried to discredit silver. But you got to find something that's going to work, because if you leave your wealth in the banks, in Wall Street, it's not really yours anymore. They're just going to play with it. And if there is a major correction, the laws have already been put in place where you, as a customer of the bank or of the Wall Street brokerages, you're going to be the very last person anybody's going to be worried about. They're going to grab all the money. They're going to pay off the derivatives first. And frankly, I don't think there's going to be anything left over after the derivatives get paid off. Now, for those of you on your Obamacare compliant insurance policies, you better take a deep breath, because apparently the rate increase for next year is going to be around 37%. 1/3 increase. It was another scam. It was a scam to enrich the health insurance industries that wrote the Affordable Care Act at the expense of you, the American people. We live in a nation of the scammers, by the scammers, and for the scammers. We need to stand up and say, no more. Meanwhile, over in Poland, a Polish member of the European Parliament has basically gone on the verbal attack against Brussels, saying that the European Union, meaning Brussels, is actually creating more problems than it solves, because it's over-legislating. It's tinkering with the member nations to a very, very tiny degree, probably to justify their continued wealth and power. And we see that in politics, where laws get passed for no other reason than to make it look like the government is actually doing something, and to justify increased power and authority over your lives, and it doesn't really serve any useful purpose to the American people. Now, apparently, Guy Verhofstadt is out there saying that Brexit only happened because of Russia. It was all Vladimir Putin's fault, and that triggered a huge backlash, saying, no, it was the European Union that triggered the Brexit. Everybody seems to be on this idea that no matter what goes wrong, it's Russia's fault. My radiator sprang a leak yesterday. It's got to be Russia's fault. The bottom fell out of the trash bag when I was taking it out to the bin. Had to be Putin. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network. And an interesting story came out of Breitbart. Apparently, there has been a study of these asylum seekers in Italy by psychologists, and they've come to the alarming conclusion that more than half of these asylum seekers in Italy are actually mentally ill. They're prone to aggressive behavior and psychotic episodes, and they're showing obvious symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. These are not going to be contributors to the Italian economy. And as I've said many, many times before, this process of migration is a filter. You're not getting the best of the people from those source countries. You're getting the ones who couldn't make it in their home countries. You're getting the ones who are fleeing prosecution. You are, according to this study, getting those who are mentally ill and they don't want to be locked up for mental illness in their own home nation. Whoever came up with this idea of open borders, it sounded really good at all those globalist conventions, and they didn't think it all the way through as to what might be the ramifications. And they just didn't. Now, getting on back to Las Vegas, two quick stories about that. Tucker Carlson interviewed David Dickey, the head of Jesus Campos Union, and he told Tucker that Campos did not need a so-called security guard card, and that's why he didn't have one. Now, Nevada law says if you're working as a security guard, you're supposed to have an ID card. And apparently a 15-year veteran security guard in Las Vegas called into the show to say that's a big, fat lie. So here is the question. Was Jesus Campos really a security guard? Or was he just pretending to be one, and he was actually there as part of this operation to stage this shooting, and he got caught in the crossfire? Because there's a lot of very interesting things going on. He was going to do all these interviews, then he canceled them. Apparently, he went down and visited in Mexico for a while to stay away from the reporters. Then he came back and he did that one interview on the Ellen Show, basically reinforcing the official story, and now he's basically vanished yet again. And to top that all off, another story coming out of freedomphoenix.com, the authorities in Las Vegas are now refusing to release any more information about the shooting at the Mandalay Bay. Nothing. You've got the official story. That's all you need. You don't need any more information. Because they know anytime they release a new piece of information, we're going to rip it to shreds out here in the independent media because none of it's making any sense. Now, getting on back to the JFK files released, and I have to admit, I'm a little surprised. There were some good things in there. And we already have the original Surgeon General's report that says that John F. Kennedy was shot from the front in the throat wound and the head wound, thereby destroying the single shooter theory. And now there is a new file that came on out saying that Lee Harvey Oswald and Jack Ruby met in the weeks before the JFK assassination. So Ruby was part of it. Now remember, Oswald supposedly was to die at the Texas Movie Theater when they went in to arrest him. And all he did is he just said, I'm not resisting arrest, I'm not resisting arrest, and they couldn't shoot him in front of the rest of the people in that theater, and all of a sudden they had a problem. The assassin wasn't supposed to be alive to challenge the official story, and that's why Jack Ruby was allowed into the basement of the Dallas police station to gun Lee Harvey Oswald down. And even though they had cars and everything parked right there, they let Oswald just lie on the ground waiting for an ambulance while he's bleeding internally and eventually died. Now, the corporate media is ignoring all of this. Their attitude is, there's nothing to see here, move along, there's nothing, it's just a bunch of nonsense. And of course, they're going to say that, because especially with regard to the single shooter theory being absolutely discredited now, the corporate media is now exposed as having been part of this lie regarding the Kennedy assassination for all of these years. They're never going to admit it. They're never going to change their story. Even Paul Craig Roberts is out there saying this is all historically very interesting information, but do not for a second think the official story will ever be changed. Because the official story is the official story, and the government operates on the principle of government infallibility, just like the Pope. We never make a mistake. We never do anything wrong. Even after the House Select Committee on Assassinations confirmed that there were multiple shooters in Dealey Plaza, the official story is still, oh yes, it was Lee Harvey Oswald, it was Lee Harvey Oswald. Even after Admiral Hyman G. Rickover confirmed that the captain of the USS Maine, Captain Sigsbee, was correct in saying the ship was destroyed by an onboard fire, the official story is, oh yes, it was a Spanish mine. We had to go to war against Spain. Even after divers found the holds of the Lusitania loaded with smuggled weapons, the official story is Lusitania was an unarmed, helpless passenger ship. The official story will never change. Therefore, it's time to stop listening to the official story. Stop wasting your time. Because all the government is going to do is make a fool of you over and over again. It's why I don't join the chorus of voices saying we need a new investigation into Sandy Hook, or a new investigation into 9/11, or a new investigation into the Boston Marathon bombing. The government will never change its official story. It's a waste of time. We don't need them to investigate anyway. We have the facts and information for ourselves. The discrepancies in the backpack and the Boston Marathon bombing, all of the discrepancies on 9/11, huge number of them. The discrepancies in the JFK assassination. We can decide for ourselves what's going on. Stop listening to the official story. It's junk. It's nonsense. It is garbage. You need to learn to be your own best analyst, and I know you can do it. You got to trust yourself before you trust anybody else. Look at the facts for yourself and figure it out. Then over in the Netherlands, this is coming from the Broadcasting Corporation of the Netherlands. Apparently, the Supreme Court of the Netherlands has ruled that the right of the government to secrecy of its activities, unity of state policy, and sensitivity of the question outweigh the importance of disclosure. And what they're talking about is the investigation into the crash of Malaysian Airlines Flight 17. That everybody was trying to say was shot down by, the Russians, was shot down by this and shot down by that. And they've collected a huge amount of evidence, and apparently the evidence does not support the desired official story, and so now it is going to be classified. You don't need to see the radar data. You don't need to see the photos of the wreckage. Just take our word for it. Vladimir Putin shot that plane down with his bear rifle. Now, getting on back to this NFL thing, which I think has gone on way, way, way too long. And by the way, as angry as I am with the government, I still respect the flag. And I stand for the anthem, and I'll salute the flag, because the flag doesn't represent the government. It represents we the people and the nation. But apparently ESPN is feeling the pinch because viewers are turning off the games, and ESPN is actually considering dropping Monday Night Football because they're losing 15,000 subscribers a day over this nonsense. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And before we get back to the news here, I want to do a quick shout-out to some of our fans in Great Britain, and this is a shout-out to Nick from his wife, Charlie, who wrote in to say how much he likes to listen to the show and ask for an autographed photo. I actually don't do that anymore. I mean, back when I was an entertainer and acting, like everybody else, I had the big stack of photos, and I don't do that anymore. I suppose I probably ought to get a new photo taken now that I've lost all this weight and I'm looking svelte and aged. But I'd have to do a lot of Photoshop on it before I dare release it out there. All right, getting on back to this Lower Manhattan shooting and truck crash, and the story is already starting to crumble. The corporate media is still out there saying, could be terror, could be terror, could be terror. What we're getting from the scene, though, is it looks like it was a road rage incident. And as I said before, what kind of a terrorist goes out to commit an act of terror with a BB gun and a paintball gun? And so at this point, it's looking like this was a road rage incident, and everybody seized on it and said, oh, we've got a terror incident. Let's make a big deal about it. Another reason why you should always be cautious about anything the corporate media is saying. This is an interesting story that's appearing in the foreign press, not so much here. And basically what it's saying is the leaders of these U.S. left-wing groups, including Antifa, have been meeting with Al-Qaeda and ISIS leaders to try and figure out how they're going to bring down President Trump. This is according to an investigation by the FBI. This one reported in the Daily Mail. And so this Antifa group and all these other ultra-left-wing groups, they are not a genuine grassroots movement. They're another manufactured color revolution in our midst to take our country away from us. So you just keep that in mind when they're out there doing their Rage at the Sky next week or wherever that's going to happen. Now, actress Rose McGowan is now having to deal with an arrest warrant that's been issued for her for drug possession. And basically the story is that she accidentally left behind a piece of luggage at an airport, and for some reason whatever, it was given a swab test and tested positive for narcotics. They won't say which one. And they're not saying they found any actual narcotics in there. They've got the chemical swab. But basically they've issued the arrest warrant, and she's going to have to appear in a Loudoun County, Virginia court. And it's been entered into a national law enforcement database. And Rose is out there saying basically this wouldn't have happened if she'd taken Harvey Weinstein's hush money for his sexual assault on her. And this is the exact same playbook they did on Corey Feldman a week ago when he's out there blowing the whistle on the Hollywood pedophilia problem, and he gets a marijuana charge thrown at him. So they do like to play dirty. There's been another hate crime. Apparently over in Kansas City there was a church. It was spray painted with swastikas and the KKK and was set on fire. They caught who did it. It was an African-American man. It's another fake hate crime. Now here is a very interesting story, and this comes from no less than the Times of Israel itself, where Israel is now acknowledging that the vast majority of Jews living in Israel are in fact descendants of the Central Asian Khazars. Now, Alvin Toffler, with his book, The 13th Tribe, made this connection before, that the Ashkenazi Jews are not descended from the biblical Hebrews, that they were Central Asian Khazars who were converted to Judaism by their king in order to keep both the Christians and the Muslims out of their territory. And then when Khazaria fell, those descendants of the converted Jews migrated north into Russia and westward into Europe. And that's where they came from. And now they're back in Israel, but they are not, in fact, descendants of the biblical Hebrews. It's been a huge debate for many, many years. And Israel's always out there saying, oh, you anti-Semites, you Jew haters. And now they're saying, yeah, you got us. I mean, look at the skin color of the Ashkenazi. They don't look Middle Eastern at all, do they? Just use your eyes. Use your brain. So another one of the great lies has now bit the dust. Getting on back to Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and Antifa, a lot of this is coming out of a book. Former editor-in-chief of the New York Times Magazine, Edward Klein, has a new book, The Plot to Destroy Trump. And he's talking about how all these Antifa groups are working with these terrorist organizations to bring our nation down. We'll be right back after these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And first of all, a short correction here. It's Arthur Koestler, not Alvin Toffler, who wrote The 13th Tribe. I got that messed up, and a very alert listener corrected me on that. Getting on back to the situation in Manhattan, the official story is now it was an act of terror, even though the NYPD is saying there's no indications of a larger group. This guy was just acting alone. And again, the absurdity of this guy doing this with a BB gun and a paintball gun. Remember the first report, oh, he's out there shooting people from inside his truck. He didn't shoot anybody. Well, if he did, it was a BB or a paintball. We've got the Homeland Security already out there saying, oh, this is definitely ISIS. This is the 9th truck ramming that ISIS has used. So that's now the official story. Even though on the ground there in Manhattan, it's shaping up, it was a road rage incident. So everything that happens, blame it on ISIS, blame it on Russia, so forth and so on. Getting into the area of political correctness, NBC News, and I imagine NBC's probably wondering why nobody's really paying attention to them, but this is one of the reasons. NBC News came out with a story basically claiming, this is Melanie Ben-Skosmy, produced a segment on Monday, how gamers are facilitating the rise of the alt-right, claiming that gamers, specifically white male gamers, computer gamers, are racist, sexist Klansmen who hate women and minorities. So this is according to NBC News. You got to hate the white people. Got to hate gamers. I think that is about one of the most ridiculous things I've heard come out of NBC since the side-mounted gas tanks on the trucks. Now, apparently, the U.S. Deputy Attorney General has told business leaders that the U.S. government is going to pull back from its demand for mandatory backdoors in all encryption as long as the ISPs can cough up an unencrypted copy of every message, call, photo, or other form of communications they handle. Which is absurd, because how are the ISPs going to get it if it's encrypted on the sender's device and decrypted on the recipient's device? It tells us that the U.S. Deputy Attorney General does not really understand how any of this technology works. And in any event, somebody who's really got something to hide isn't going to be using cell phones or the internet because they know it's compromised. Or if they're going to use it, they're going to use their own encryption. Because as we demonstrated with our NSA challenges, it's very easy to create a new system of encryption the NSA will not be able to break. Certainly not in a timely enough manner to be effective. So it's ridiculous. And again, all of this is a violation of the Fourth Amendment. Now, apparently, police and NVIDIA are working on a program to add real-time facial recognition to the cameras on police cars. So they're just going to drive down the street, and the system is going to say, this is Joe Blow, and this is Sally, whatever, all in real time. Now, this is ignoring the fact that so far, facial recognition systems have been very, very unreliable. But it makes money. We're going to just go ahead and spend tax dollars on this. Here. Now then, back to the world of the iPhones, and apparently there are now allegations that if you have Facebook on your smartphone in general, that it is listening to you, even when you're not making a call or doing the instructions. And apparently somebody did a test where they discussed a subject that normally would not interest them in the presence of their smartphone. And all of a sudden, 3 days later, they start getting advertisements directed at them on that very subject. So, again, we're being spied on by everybody and by everything in our lives. I mean, the Gestapo could only dream of this kind of saturation surveillance of their people. The Gestapo had to go mostly by bluff here. But getting on to the iPhone 10, or the iPhone X, people are sort of flipping back and forth on that, and they're talking about that face recognition system, which, by the way, failed to work on the debut, on the product launch, where it was showing how it was going to work. And the idea is that it makes a three-dimensional map of your face. It's not just a photo scan. It literally has all these little lasers and sensors that makes a three-dimensional map of your face, and then every time you hold the phone up in front of you, it says, yes, you're really you, and will open up the phone. And Apple was so confident in this facial ID that it got rid of the Touch ID fingerprint sensor, which worked really well. And unfortunately, the initial reviewers, the people who've been given an iPhone 10 to evaluate, are basically saying that, no, it's not really working all that well. And it's not more convenient than the fingerprints. It's not more reliable. And they're trying to be gracious and magnanimous because, after all, they got a free phone, and their job is to make it look like it's a great product. But they're out there saying, no, it's a serious, serious problem. Apple may have blundered badly with this technology. And yes, it's got the whiz-bang factor, but whiz-bang only lasts as long as it's working correctly. If it's not working properly, people are going to get really tired of having to constantly type in that 6-digit access code. Taking off the fingerprint scanner, I think, was a major strategic mistake, all on a phone that's going to cost $1,000. And apparently there's another flaw in the latest release of iOS, and it has to do with the calculator function. Because when you're working with the calculator and you're touching the buttons, there's this little animation where the button lights up and then fades out. And it turns out that when that animation is playing, the calculator won't see the operating buttons. And so if you're going to do 2 plus 2 plus 2, you may wind up with 24 instead, because it's missed one of the operations. And I tested this out on my phone, and yes, it works. Fortunately, I don't use that calculator. I have an HP 15C emulator that works on this thing really, really well. I miss my HP 15C. That was an elegant, elegant machine. Now, apparently, a highly critical flaw has been discovered that allows hackers to hijack the Oracle Identity Manager. And it's apparently an easily exploitable vulnerability, and it affects Oracle Identity Manager versions. Well, it's a whole bunch of versions, and they're on the front page of whatreallyhappened.com. Oracle's releasing patches, but Oracle is saying you get those patches on there right now, because apparently it's wide, wide open. And again, with all this cybercrime and hacking and everything going on, where is the NSA? Why aren't they proving that their worth to the American people who pay all the bills by going on out and doing something that helps the American people? Or is the NSA the cyber criminals? Kaspersky thinks so. Kaspersky thinks the hacker collective, the Equation Group, is actually the National Security Agency. So, now, as you know, social media is cracking down on questionable speech and fake news. And there's this article out here that said the Twitter crackdown on speech rapidly turning the platform into a mindless cesspool of conformist stupidity. And yes, that actually is true. I've stopped using Twitter. I've stopped using Facebook. I'm not using any of those because you can't say what you want to say. You can only use their system if you say what they think you should be allowed to say. Now, here's another one. For those of you who indulge in browsing photos of people scantily clad and so forth and so on. Apparently, iPhone and Android devices are automatically cataloging the photos that you look at. And most of the categories are rather benign, like dog, food, and sunglasses. But apparently some of these categories extend to things like brassiere, corset, girdle, and so forth. So they're starting to build a catalog of what pictures you like to look at. This may actually bring paper porn magazines like Playboy and Penthouse back to the newsstand, because you can't hack a magazine remotely. Now, as you know, there's a lot of online apps that connect people who want to buy and sell things. eBay is one of the best ones. One of the latest is OfferUp, which prioritizes your buying and selling by distance. In other words, it's there to connect you with people very close to you who is selling what you want to buy. And unfortunately, it's already being exploited by criminals. Apparently, a Navy sailor and his pregnant wife have been put in the hospital. They were shot multiple times trying to buy a cell phone through this app called OfferUp. And apparently the criminals got on there and said, yes, we have a cell phone to sell. Come on over and meet us. And attempted to rob them, possibly did rob them. I don't have that detail. And then wound up shooting them. Now, over in Salzburg, Germany, you're going to love this one. They're starting to put these, blister pack, the little inflated air bubbles. They're wrapping it around lamp posts because so many people are zombied into the smartphones. They're literally walking into these lamp posts because they're not paying attention. And that really is a dangerous situation. Claire and I, we almost had an accident at our local shopping mall where we were going in the parking lot, and somebody with his face buried in the smartphone just walked right in front of us without even looking up. Folks, situational awareness. Smartphones and tablets are great, but not for your entire life. Open your eyes and look at the real world. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Rick in Arizona. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I just want to make a comment about what you just said about cell phones. They've killed more people than drunk drivers ever have. As far as the police state goes, the United States works anything the Germans had against the Jews in the 1930s. So if you're Jewish, you might want to think about that. And Hillary Clinton is the anti-Zionist wing of the Democrat Party. And that's Walmart, and that's Tyson Foods. And so I don't know. Nothing's going to happen to Hillary. She's a juggernaut that people really don't know, who's behind her. So that's
well, I disagree with you. I'm one of those people. I want to see the evil people of the world brought down. And right now, that, to me, is the Clintons. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Last segment of our program today here. And, yeah, the official story is it was an act of terror. ISIS, terror, 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 terror. Pay no attention to Uranium Gate or Dossier Gate. Pay no attention to the fact that Mueller can't find any proof linking Trump directly to Russia. We've got terror to feed you. We've got blood and all this other stuff. And, again, seriously. A guy's going to commit a terror attack, and he takes a BB gun and a paintball gun. I'm sorry. No, I'm not buying that one. But the official story is it's a terror attack. Everybody's running with it. We've got the terror attack now. Speaking of terror, or at least being extremely nervous, over in Iceland, their largest volcano, Bardabunga, it looks like it's going to erupt again. And every time it does, it's a major, major catastrophe. Not just for Iceland, obviously, but that huge plume of ash and dust spreads over Europe. They have to move the air travel corridors all over because you cannot fly an aircraft through that ash. The aircraft will be destroyed. So they're getting ready to do that one. Getting on back to the world of computers, this must be a little bit embarrassing. Microsoft was having an Ignite conference, and they were demonstrating how to migrate to their Azure cloud service. And apparently the presenter, Michael Leworthy, couldn't get the Edge browser to work, kept failing in the middle of the presentation. So he took a deep breath, and he installed Chrome to get the thing working. And, of course, the crowd was saying, yeah, Chrome, absolutely. Why do they let this stuff out without testing?
This is William, hopefully your favorite videographer from 2X Publishing. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, please leave comments below, or like, follow, or subscribe to us and get notices of all our videos. We love it, even when you call.